Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. This is Yeshayahu, chapter 64, Isaiah 64, which is Perek Samach Daled. In 63, we ended in the middle of Yeshayahu's prayer. He was praying to God. And the last several verses of 63 were very unusual and forceful and almost shocking prayer, where in verse 17, Yeshayahu turns to God and says, "Why is it that you turned us away from your ways? Why did you turn our heart away from worshiping you?" The way we explained it then was that what Yeshayahu is asking for is a return to the days where God's justice is more obvious and more open. The days of the Exodus, when it was clear that God punished the evil oppressors and God miraculously saved the oppressed. And that all these hundreds or thousands of years of exile and suffering and times when God's justice is anything but obvious makes it difficult for people to stay with God, believe in God, be faithful to God, and so on. And in this sense, this is what Yeshayahu is asking for. He continues with this prayer in Samach Daled, in this chapter today, 64. And I want to read to you a few earlier things which are really lead up to 64 and help us understand it completely. So first I want to turn your attention to Yeshayahu chapter 48, Memches, starting with the third verse, which is really where God kind of explained why he used to treat us in a much more obvious, much more in a way where his face wasn't so hidden. Back then we said, Harishonot me'azi gadati. Long ago, I told you the things that were going to happen. I informed you that I was going to perform miracles, and I was going to do A, B, and C, and then I did it. Midati, I did it out of my own knowledge, God said, because I knew kikashata, that you were a stubborn people. And I thought that this would work. I'm skipping a little bit some of the verses there, but God goes several verses here explaining his so to speak, thinking process, if you will. And I told you then beforehand, I told him before things should happen, I told you what would happen. Pen tomar because I was afraid that if I didn't tell you beforehand and predict it, that you might attribute it to some other power, some other force. Shomata chazei kula, you heard all of this. Ishmatira chadashos me'aton, tzuros, and so on. I told you all this news. And however, gam lo shamata, in verse 8, you didn't listen then. Gam lo yadata. Ki yadati, because I knew bagod tivgod, that you were just going to rebel. So in other words, I tried that method, and it didn't work. And therefore, God says, Leman shemi a'arich api. It is only in my name from now on that I'm going to do this. I'm not doing anything special for you. I won't allow you to be cut off, so I will let you survive. However, I'm going to purify you, lo, because of not with silver, but I'm going to purify you in affliction. So now you're going to go through a time period of affliction. This was God explaining to us what the exile, what the times of affliction, the times when we don't see his face, we don't see his justice obviously anymore. That was Isaiah 48. It's extremely important to keep that in mind when we read 64 today. Another thing is in chapter 43, verse 16, verse 18, it says, Al tizkuru rishonos v'kadmonios al tisponanu. Don't think anymore about the way I used to treat you in the olden days, because now in the new days of redemption, ato titzmach, I'm going to be again like I was Rishonos. Rishonos, as we've seen many times, refers to the way I dealt with you in the past, the time of, specifically usually referring to the Exodus, but the times of miracles, the times when God's justice. So we see a pattern. We see God stating that that there was a time in the past when I dealt with you in a miraculous way and my justice was obvious. And we know that that time resulted in the acceptance of the Jewish people of God at Sinai. And that then there's a long period of suffering, and that period came about because we didn't listen, we didn't pay attention during the time when it was more obvious. And then there's going to be a time in the future when miracles will happen again and justice will happen more obviously again. Just one or two more things I want to read to you just to complete these thoughts. Again, in chapter 51, verse 9, Uri, Uri, livshi oz zera Adonai. This is where Isaiah prays to God and says, wake up, wake up. Uri kime kedem doros olamim. Right, wake up like you did in the old days. And I'm skipping a little. Halo atia macharavism. You're the one that dried up the sea and brought the people in through the sea. So bring us back again, and bring back the people to. So there's Isaiah praying that this time of open, clear justice should come about again. And then one more thing, where God says in chapter 54, verse 7, Berega katon azavtich, and for a few moments I left you, but in great mercy I will gather you again. So there, where God is saying that, yes, I'm going to have this period of time, and I do have this period of time now of suffering, but it's going to end. Now we can look at 64, which is the chapter we're studying now, and completely understand it. And we're still in the middle of Isaiah's prayer, which didn't end. This chapter should really be attached to the previous one. Just in the Christian numbering system, they plunked in a new number here for some reason. But he's continuing with the prayer. Ki kedoach eish hamosim. Just like God, he's praying to God, just like fire burns down the dry brush, and mayim tive eish, and just as water extinguishes flame, lodia shimcha l'tzarecha, make your name known to those that are your enemies, those that are enemies of God. Mipanecha, from before you, Goyim Yergazu, the nations should have fear, they should tremble with fear. Ba'asoscha no ra'os, when you do things that are wondrous, lo nikaveh, that we couldn't even hope for, when we see such things, Yoradata mipanecha harim nazolu, and you came down from before you and melted mountains, or mountains shook. So he's asking that God intervene in this miraculous way, like doing wonders. Ume'olam lo shamu ulo he'ezinu. Such things have never been heard, have never been seen. Ayin lo ra'asa alehim zulascha. Right, of things that eyes have never seen, other than you, God, can imagine such things, or do such things, or know such things. Things that you do for those who have faith in you, who trust you, who wait for you. And then he said, however, so these are things that you did in the past, and he's praying that you do them in the future again. Pagato et sos viose tzedek. This is a continuation of his complaint to God, that your period of time of suffering, of exile, resulted in us leaving you. Pagata, you have struck him, he who would have been very happy to do righteousness, to do good. Had you continued to treat us that way, like you did back then, and like we're praying that you do in the future, that people would have been totally happy to do tzedek, to do righteousness. Bidrachecha yizkerucha, and they would have remembered you in your ways, as they saw, your presence in this world. Hein ato katzavta vanechata. It is you that got mad at us, you got angry at us and punished us, and then we sinned. It's important to note that Yeshayahu here is including himself, in those that were the sinners. Vanechata, and we sinned. Bahem olam vanivashea. We have been in them, or I saw a translation in steeped in them for so long. Vanivashea, and vanivashea, that we should still be saved. In other words, can we be saved? By the way, this explanation that I've been saying now, is based on the explanation of a little bit of the Radak, but this pasuk, what I just read, verse 4, I translated it the way the Malbim translates it, and this understanding of Yeshayahu's prayer here, and his complaint against God, and regarding how, when God hides His face from us, Yeshayahu is kind of blaming God and saying that that's what causes the sinning. This I also derived from the words of the Malbim. V'anehi katome kulanu, and now we became, this is verse 5, we have all become like someone who is unclean, someone who is tameh, ucheveged idim kol tzidkosenu, and even all of our good deeds, keveged idim, even all of our good deeds are just addressing. We just do them in order to look good on the outside. We keep all these mitzvot because we can't believe them deep down on the inside. We don't have that deep feeling of trust or faith anymore. But on the outside, we dress up like we're supposed to, just to show. Uveged idim. This is translating idim as witnesses. Clothing of our tzidkos, our righteousness, is just like clothing which we wear to show other people. Vanovel ke'oleh kolanu, and we all are withered like leaves. This reminds us of the same language used in chapter 1, verse 30. Just to read it real quick, where Yeshayahu said, "Kitiu ke'ela noveles oleh," like a tree whose leaves are withered. The same words being used over there. That the people, when they are not with God, are like withered, dried out leaves. Va'avonenu, and our sins, koruach yisaunu, get carried off like the wind. So I'm sorry, yisaunu, they carry us off like the wind. That's what that's what our sins are doing. And that was, I mentioned that just to show another of the, I don't know how many examples I've already given of the similar language and ideas being used in the supposed first half and second half of Yeshayahu. The ein korei v'shimcha, and we continuing with verse 6. Yet, despite all of this suffering and all of this lack of apparent justice, none of us is calling out your name. And no one is calling out your name. Misorer lahachazikbach. Nobody is waking themselves up to cling to you, God, because you've hidden your face from us. You made us melt because of our sins. Our sins have made us melt. We've turned into nothing. We're depressed. We lost faith. We lost hope. Remember, this is the faith. This is Yeshayahu talking to God. Just a few chapters ago, in 62, we had Yeshayahu telling the people, don't lose faith, don't give up hope, keep clinging to God. Never be silent. But when he talks to God, he's talking reality here. But now you, God, you are our Father. You're our only last hope. We are the clay. You are the potter. You're the one who made us. We are all the work of your hands. Al tiktov Adonai ad ma'od. God, don't be angry so much like you are. Just look really back quickly at verse 50, chapter 57, verse 16. Kilola olam ariv, where God said, I'm not going to be angry at you forever. Volola netzach ektof, I will not be forever angry. So now Isaiah is flipping that back to God and saying, Dun al tiktov, do not be angry so much. V'Allah at tiskaravon, and stop remembering our sin forever. Hein habet na'amcha kulanu, just look, please look at us. We are your nation. Alrei kachacha hayu midbar, your holy cities have become like a desert. Tzion midbar hayasa, Zion has become like a wilderness. Yerushalayim shemama, and Jerusalem is destroyed. Beis kadshenu v'sifartenu, our holy temple and our glory. Hasher hilalucha avoseinu, where our fathers praised you and prayed to you, and Hoyol Sreifa has become burnt in flames. And everything that we loved has become destroyed. Ha'al eila tisapak Adonai. Over such things, God, you should hold yourself back. You should ignore us. You should restrain yourself. Techashe, you're going to be silent. Usa'anenu ad ma'od, and just continue making us suffer so much. Is that how it's going to be? So this is the end of Isaiah's prayer in chapter 64. Thank you for joining us and looking forward to studying chapter 65 together.